Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm Mansa Musa, co-host with Eddie Conway. Eddie, the report give you an update on Eddie Conway. Eddie Conway is doing good, and hopefully, and it's my prayer that he make a cameo here at some point in time. Imagine this right here. Imagine if you live in the country or state where you could save $500 million monthly in your budget. Imagine also that annually you could save $1.2 billion in revenue. Just imagine this in the face of economic repression and economic degradation that's taking place in this country. It would stand to reason that all citizens in this state would be cheering to have this done. Here to talk about the closing of the California Correction Center in Susanville, which is recently came out, opinion from the courts came out saying that the state has to can go forward with closing it. Here to talk about three people that's in this space and has something to do with the closing of it or live there. I'm gonna let them introduce yourself. Starting with you, General. Introduce yourself to the Rattling the Bars audience.
Good morning. First and foremost, thank you for having me. My name is General Dogan. I'm a fight back organizer here on Skid Row with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. I'm also a former California prisoner. I did 27 years in California prison system from level 1 all the way to a level 5 men's most dangerous row in the SHU program.
Okay. Shakir, introduce yourself to the Rattling the Bars audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey all, thanks for having me. My name is Shakir Rahman. I'm an attorney and an organizer here at the Los Angeles Community Action Network and with the Stop LP Spying Coalition. I represented 3 men who are currently incarcerated at the California Correctional Center in Susanville in their efforts to bring their perspectives about what's going on inside the prison and the stakes of the efforts to keep the prison open. So that was the lawsuit that just resolved last week.
Okay, and Brian, introduce yourself to the Rattling the Bars audience. Tell a little bit about yourself.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Brian Kaneda, and I'm the Deputy Director of CURB, Californians United for a Responsible Budget. We're working on a campaign to close California prisons, and we are saying that it's a time for California to close at least 10 prisons by 2025.
Okay, we're gonna start with you, Shakir, because like you said, this decision that came out after the struggle of the community in Susanville fighting to keep the prison open. Walk us through the process of the finality of this particular litigation.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the case finally ended this week, and the thing about it is that it never should have gotten this far. Basically, the city of Susanville, as soon as the governor announced, pursuant to the legislature told him, California's prison infrastructure needs to be shrank. It needs to be much smaller, and you need to prioritize especially old, dangerous kind of prisons to shutter. So the governor then announced another prison as well as CCC in Susanville as the first 2 he was going to close. And he announced that kind of early, giving the city extra notice to start, preparing for that shutdown. Immediately, the city's residents and the city's officials, the city government, sued the state, saying that the state doesn't have the power to close that prison, or they should have chosen a different prison. All kinds of claims about, that basically because of the effect of closing the prison and more than anything, the city's kind of financial stake in needing for that prison to be there, needing for the prisoners to be there, needing for the prison to be full, and because of their financial reliance on the revenue that they get from that prison, the revenue that they extract from people being, caged there. For that reason, the prison needs to stay open. It needs to stay open as long as they kind of financially need it. And so, as soon as that happened, prisoners at CCC, organizers incarcerated at CCC started, mobilizing against this, writing to the judge, bringing in their perspective of, first of all, these are the conditions inside the prison. And second of all, this kind of argument that a prison needs to stay open because of the revenue that it's generating for people. And people, by the way, the city of Susanville is predominantly white community. Obviously, as we know from the reality of incarceration in California, the population of CCC, the incarcerated population, is disproportionately Black, disproportionately Indigenous, disproportionately brown and poor. And a lot of them shipped, from places like Los Angeles all the way up to Susanville, which is kind of on the Nevada-Oregon border, far away there. And so, yeah, bringing up the point that this kind of argument is akin to kind of the logic of slavery. And this is the kind of that slavers were saying of, oh, you can't get rid of slavery because that's going to upend our way of life. So they were bringing that perspective in, but the judge kept ignoring it. So then we decided to support with an amicus brief, kind of formally laying out these arguments.
Okay, and General,
Yes.
he spoke on Rahim just spoke on Rahman just spoke on the conditions of the prison that's being closed. Can you educate our audience on some of the conditions that exist in that particular plantation?
Yes, for sure. So when I went there, it was quite a while ago. It was 1996, and I was a parole violators. I was there. I went there for my addiction. I think I had like a 9-month parole violation, and so I'm surprised to hear that that you're talking about conditions, because back in 1996, I could tell you right now. So first of all, as soon as I got the ducat saying that I was going to Susanville, everybody's like, "Oh, you're going to Lose Your Girl World." I was like, "What?" The prison was nicknamed Lose Your Girl World because it was so far. Just like you said, you got to go all the way out the Oregon border. The bus went all the way out there. We had to go outside the California line and then come back in, go around, come back in to get to the prison. And I remember being shackled up for all that long time. And it is like you on a slave trip, because halfway there, you run out of water. The bus driver is only like two. I mean, it's the guy that drives the bus, the guy that sit in the front with a gun, and the guy that sits shotgun in the back of the bus. And they ain't stopping that bus to give you no water or nothing like that. They'll be like, "Oh no, that's security reasons, right?" So they push all the way on. Man, we had to go there, like starving, hungry, people using the bathroom on themselves, all kind of stuff, right? And so then when we got to the prison was very old. It was my first time there. I believe it was a level 2 and 3 prison, right? And so the majority of the prison was like was dorm living and stuff like that. But they had like they had already started the triple bunks. They had already closed down the gym and was putting bunks in the gym. And as you walk through the prison, I mean, it was like, I went to Folsom, and when you go to Folsom, you know what I'm saying? You see old gunshot wounds on the wall. You see blood stains on the wall and stuff like that. And Susanville was no different. It was an old prison, right? So you see stuff all chipped up, paint that ain't been fixed in I don't know how, like decades has gone by. It looked like you walking through an old castle. All right?
Let me ask you this here, General. Are you surprised then that the court has come out and ruled that they should close it? Are you surprised at that?
No,
in 2020, we're talking about in 2022.
Back in when I was there, inmates was filing complaints on the prison. Like I said, the only reason it was a majority all white males that was working there, and you could clearly tell the prison was the town's bread and butter. And so and then also I'd just like to say real quick though, my prison number is C65343. Here go my card right here. So when I came to prison, it was like 1981. When Al Capone came to prison, California prison system was in the 30s, right? So I came like 50 years after Al. When Al came, he had an A number, right? I got a C number. So I only went through 1 letter and a half in 50 years, right?
That's right.
The time that I got there from the early 90s, from 92, like all the way to like where it is now, they would flip the alphabet. Within like 10 years, they would flip the alphabet and start doing double numbers. And all this was because of the war on drugs. And I remember CIA, Prison Industry Authority, in 82 when I went there, was a multi-billion-dollar industry then. I don't know what it is now, right? But yeah, we need to get rid of some prisons. California have the largest prison system in the world. When you look at it, over 85% of the people that's in there is for a nonviolent offense. People's in there for medicating and stuff like that, right? And so, it's the 13th Amendment, all over again, where it is slavery. They found the way
Right.
to justify slavery under the new 13th Amendment, and they build these prison systems. And California, understand me, been leading the nation in many years for this. And it's just not Susanville that's bad conditions. A lot of those old prisons like Tehachapi, understand me, is still toe up and like that. Chino, CMC, CRC, I can do roll call on them. All of them.
All right. Hold up on the roll call. And rightly so, you can do roll call. And this is a great day for us. And that's why we want to go with Brian. Brian, as I open up, I talked about how much money is going to be saved by the closure of CCC. And I talked about the fact that if you lived in a state where this money, you was going to save this money, which ultimately would be reinvested in the infrastructure of Medicaid, housing, and other things that society would need, it stands to reason that people would be cheering. Why do you think, and walk us through your role in terms of like responsible budgeting. Walk us through your organization and how your organization fit into this design to get rid of the prison industrial complex in California.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm here for the roll call too, because we can name all kinds of prisons that need to shut down. And we can make an argument for every single one in California, because more than anything, we know that prisons are racist, and we know that so many people from our communities are being disappeared into them, and that's been the case for decades. And cost is real, not just human costs. But closing CCC, for instance, is going to save Californians at least $122 million per year. Mm-hmm. And Mansa, you really said it. We're not looking to save that money, right? Like, that's not going back into the government. We want them to spend the money. Right. We want them to spend the money on services. We want them to spend the money on the things that we know actually keep people safe, like healthcare, housing, all of the things that we actually know build strong communities. And, this isn't just us saying this as advocates and organizers. The state's own nonpartisan legislative analyst office produced a report in November of 2020 that outlined at least $1.5 billion in annual savings if California committed to closing 5 prisons by 2025. And that's where we come in. Curb, Californians United for a Responsible Budget, we do budget advocacy. We know that the state spends upwards of $18.6 billion on corrections annually. And we and our allies and member organizations, people inside prisons who organize with us, we're saying that there is a more responsible way to spend this budget other than human caging.
Right. And Shakir, in terms of the litigation, I think that it's final in this regard. The prison's supposed to be closed in 2023. Have the city has Susanville filed any type of appeal to try to keep it open? Because that's the reason why, like you say, it shouldn't be going on this long, but it's their bread and butter, so they really fighting to maintain the plantation.
Yeah, I mean, the prison was supposed to be closed in June 2022. It was supposed to be closed 3 months ago. That was the original announcement back in 2021, and it was only delayed because of this just kind of bogus lawsuit and the judge giving the lawsuit a lot more air than it deserved. So, the prison already should have been closed. It's the prison's right on the line of it's in kind of wildfire country, so it's imperiled by the wildfire season that's starting. It's a whole nother year that it's going to exist that it was never supposed to exist, and it's only because of this kind of opportunistic lawsuit that the city filed. And yeah, I mean, hopefully the decision this week kind of, is the final word on all that. But, the city of Susanville's trying everything, has not kind of shied away from kind of frivolous claims to try to keep the prison open.
And General, all right, going back to you, we're gonna go, because you're the expert in terms of these decadent conditions, living conditions, and environment. So, in your mind, what would be the next one up to close? If you had to go down the list, we ain't talking. We know we want Quentin closed, we know we want Folsom closed, but what would be the next logical prison, to your knowledge, if you have any insight, that you think should be closed?
So most definitely, I think they needs to dismantle death row and the death house and all that. I know the Newsom came through and took some of the stuff out, but most definitely San Quentin. San Quentin is probably still got one of the old prisons. Tehachapi probably would be another one, and then you got some like Chino right down here. I mean, Chino was so bad when I was there, and they continue to keep it open. The steps, it's like about to fall down itself. It's probably older than Rome, and so I mean, and so any of those old prisons like that, the ones with the bars. So now I'm surprised because I know the system has changed toward these prisons that are more like gas chambers, ones that are isolated, where they can, they use this gas to like when people lock up cells and stuff like that, right? Pepper spray and all that kind of stuff. So more isolated type gas chambers that the prison system is creating now. So they're getting rid of the old prisons with the bars and stuff. But the ones with the bars are the ones that has the oldest and the worstest probably conditions that are in them. And then a lot of them is just bad because of overcrowding right now, right? Now the medical issues that in prisons are real bad. People are dying in prison, because they can't get the right treatment and stuff like that, right?
Right, and if memory serves me correct, and Shakir, you can probably talk about this. They did file a lawsuit dealing with Eighth Amendment. They did raise a couple of Eighth Amendment claims pertaining to like the inhumane conditions in California prison. I think they got a ruling came out that gave them the courts ruled in their favor that California prisoners had made an Eighth Amendment claim on a class action. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Yeah, I mean, Brian can speak more to the broader picture of across the prison system in California, but every day prisoners are filing Eighth Amendment claims about conditions that they're experiencing. There's been a number of class actions. The Brown v. Plata litigation that has took a very long time was about kind of grave neglect of both mental health and other health access within the prisons. And what was kind of monumental about that decision is it was one of the first times that the first time that the U.S. Supreme Court ordered a massive kind of reduction of prison, saying kind of along the lines that we're all saying, coming from a conservative Supreme Court, that there's no way you can humanely deliver health services and meet the basic kind of dignity and needs of prisoners at the level that they've got. And the only way to address that is not reform, is not putting more resources into it, but it's just to reduce the prison population. So,
hey Brian, and in terms of because in this whole conversation, the reality is, and I think you best represent this reality, is that we're talking about saving money, we're talking about saving taxpayers' money, and we're talking about eliminating a system that relies on human suffering to be able to provide jobs for people. From your perspective, right, where do we stand at now? Do you think we got the momentum to see more prisons? Because I read in the decision that our prisons need to be closed. Newsom has said that our prisons will be closed. Do you think that from your organization perspective that we got the momentum to start dismantling the California prison industrial complex institution by institution?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what we're trying to harness now, is that momentum. And prisons that could close in tandem at the same time with CCC are already being actively discussed in the public sphere. So I really think that this is a rare, right, perfect opportunity to go as hard as we can and demand that we close as many prisons as possible over the next few years. And I think it's important to remember, we're talking about which prisons to close. There's no such thing as a bad prison to close. But CDCR should expand the criteria for prison closure to include the voices of impacted people. The general was just talking, clearly people who have been inside these prisons are some of the most informed to know why they should close. And that's why we did a survey of over 2,000 system impacted people that helped rank what people inside were saying were the primary issues that should influence which prisons should be selected next. And that included unsafe health conditions. So we're talking about water contamination, poison, asbestos, mold, which prisons are the most overcrowded, the cost of incarcerating people there, and the location of the prison. We talked earlier, distance from loved ones and being inaccessible to travel, and the highest number of homicides and suicides, because we know prisons are deadly. We believe CDCR should be incorporating these criteria for closure. But, all state prisons are toxic, and California would collectively, cumulatively benefit by any state prison closing. And that's one of the reasons why we're demanding a concrete plan to close more prisons from the Newsom administration, hopefully by the January budget. So we want him to outline the plan for which prisons will close next. That can't just be an announcement about closures. We want that, but we also want a plan for how the cost savings is going to be captured to best support people who have been impacted by the incarceration crisis, people who are formerly incarcerated, and also to create new opportunities in prison towns that are reliant on these economies. We know that everybody deserves the right to dignified employment if that's what they want. So, even these people who are the ops, we're not trying to leave anyone behind. And with the state's leadership, these closures could actually be a much more smooth process compared to what happened in Susanville, where there was this outcry, a reasonable outcry in terms of the fact that it's scary when anybody loses a job. It's scary when you don't know what your future is going to look like. But economies that depend on human caging and the people who profit from them need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and start thinking about what's next.
And you know what? We had a conversation with Nicole Porter from the Citizen Project, and
Nicole.
And she did a study on, and to resonate your point, Brian, she did a study on repurposing the prison, and in her articulation, she made it known that it's the state's responsibility to do just what you said, to find alternative ways to provide an income or economic impetus in a society. Because we're not trying to make people unemployed. We're not opposed to people working. We're just opposed to people working in the plantation, and we're becoming a chattel. But Shakir, where do we stand now in terms of monitoring and watching the outcome of this particular announcement and the potential closing? What's the where y'all positioning yourselves now if an event we have another year delay or we have another justification for why they dragging their feet? From the legal perspective, what are y'all plans? Or are y'all preparing for something like that?
Yeah, well, the June 2023 is a deadline, so that's the latest that the prison can remain open. Hopefully CDCR is working on shutting that place down like they originally had planned. It was already supposed to be shut down. We haven't had an opportunity yet to really strategize about any other kind of legal tricks that the city might pursue. Hopefully just none of that's going to happen, but Curb and others are going to be obviously watching it closely, and hopefully CCC and the other prison that closed, the Dual Vocational Center, are the first of several that the state will continue closing.
Okay, and Brian, in regard to the abolition movement, because this is the conversation that we're starting to see take shape nationwide. People are starting to look at the prison industrial complex as being a new form of slavery and mass incarceration and being prisoners being a chattel. In terms of the abolition aspect, what do Curb stand at in terms of their relationship with the abolition movement, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's so important for Curb is that we utilize an abolitionist strategy for organizing. So you don't have to be an abolitionist to be a member of Curb, but when we do advocacy, when we run legislation, we use the lens of abolition to make sure that we don't disrupt any of the work that's happening on the front lines at the grassroots. And that includes things like making sure that we don't create anything that we have to tear down later. A good example of that is there is this movement to create a kinder, nicer prison. And we know that there's no such thing. So while a lot of reformers and a lot of centrists, a lot of Democrats are interested in things like the Norway model of incarceration and trying to find a nice way to put people in cages, that's something that Curb stands against because we know that there's no such thing as a kinder prison. Another thing that's a big guiding principle for us is not leaving people behind. So, we want everyone to get free. And we know that there can be a tendency for folks to go for the low-hanging fruit, right? We don't think anybody should be in prison for doing drugs or having some kind of drug-related conviction. But the reality is, unless we create a pathway for people who are convicted of more serious kinds of harm to get out too, and that includes people who have been convicted of murder. That includes people who have been convicted of serious offenses. We need to deal with the reality that the vast majority of those people are going to come home someday. And we have to create policies that include them in freedom opportunities and make sure that they're not left behind. So abolition is our guiding principle for how we do all of our prison closure organizing.
And Shakir, you got a final word, and I'm gonna come back to you, Brian, for your final word. What's your final word on this, Shakir? Like I said earlier, we're in September in Attica. They did the Attica documentary where it showed where Attica was the #1 economy for the state, for the city of Attica. What's your final words on what happened and what we look forward to in the future when it comes to the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration?
Yeah, I mean, this whole case, this saga just goes to show kind of what we're up against. And that, that is a society that's invested in imprisonment, and that because of the legacy of enslavement and the history of this country, can comfortably in court entertain arguments that prisoners need to be treated as revenue, that prisoners can be treated as property, that the value of a prisoner is what kind of money it's making for a city. Just the fact that that is accepted by a straight face in a courtroom just kind of goes to show what we're up against. At the same time, seeing this fight led by people inside, exposing what's going on, similar to the lineage of stretching back through Attica of prisoners organizing for their liberation within the most surveilled, oppressive conditions. That goes to show that all of us, those of us who are out on the outside and aren't facing that kind of surveillance and domination, we need to do everything in our power to support this fight and to contribute.
And Brian, give your final word on this, and also give us your information on how we can, how the Rattling the Bars viewers can get in touch or network with y'all. And Shakir, you can do the same if you have some information you want to convey. But Brian, before I close, I want to just acknowledge that this is some good work on y'all part. I'm familiar with the California prison system. I never been there. I told you I did 48 years, but the entire time in the 48 years, we was doing a lot of networking with the California prison system in California. The founder of this program, former Black Panther, Eddie Conway, has a lot of friends and family members that was in California prison system. So talk about where we go from here, Brian, and what you look forward to.
Yeah, well, I think what Shakir said is beautiful. And ultimately, this is a campaign that's co-led by people inside California prisons that we're co-organizing with. And, this case specifically reached a wide audience. It had national media attention. And really, I think its resolution proves that the town never really had a great case, and the state has taken steps to make it easier to close more prisons in the future. So it's time to close this chapter because additional prison closures seem to be on the horizon. And we know that CCC's slow closure is actually hurting people inside of the prison. It's hurting the most vulnerable Californians and wasting millions of dollars that could be spent on formerly incarcerated people, and even for Susanville for new opportunities. And it's well past time to move on from this and start talking about which prisons are going to close next, because we believe we could close at least 8 more over the next 3 years. And in order to do that, these discussions have to be underway. You can visit our website, curbprisonspending.org, to learn more about our campaigns, and follow us on social media. Instagram and Twitter is @curbprisons. We have actions all the time where you can send letters to the budget committees in the legislature, send letters to Governor Newsom, and tell people in your community that prison closure is actually an important issue, that it affects tens of thousands of people, and it has billions of dollars in play that could be better spent on our communities. So care about it. Care about closing California prison.
And Shakir, you got any contact information you wanted to part with?
No, I'll just say the same, and I think this is what General Dogan would have said if he didn't have to run off to another organizing meeting, which is join the fight. Follow Curb, join the coalition. I work here in LA with the Los Angeles Community Action Network, LA Can, and the Stop LAP Spying Coalition, both of which are organizing on some of the the policies and the systems that are feeding people into prisons, and that are also then criminalizing people and surveilling them when they come out. So yeah, work closely with your incarcerated neighbors and with people who are coming out of prisons and organizing to end their brutality.
Thank you both, brothers, and for joining us. And there you have it, the real news about CCC closing. And in Brian's words, what prison will we close next? We like to end on that note because for us, this is a great day for us in that
Absolutely.
we ending slavery as we know it, modern day slavery as we know it. On behalf of Eddie Conway and myself, we ask that you continue to support Rattling the Bars and the real news. And you can go to our website to know how you can support both Real News and Rattling the Bars. Thanks both of y'all for coming, taking your time out, and continue to do the great works that y'all are doing.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great talking to you.